Good evening, Browns fans, and welcome to the Gang of Three. You may notice, if you can count carefully on your screen, that there are not, in fact, three of us. There are two of us. Lane is unable to make it this evening, but wherever he is, he's working on his phone for sure. Pete, how you doing, sir?
I am all right. How are you?
Well, I am all right as well. A little anxious uh, about the Cleveland Browns search for a head coach. And we already have a lot of people watching the show as well as asking questions. So why don't we just drop right into the questions rather than stuff I made up before the show? And the first one comes from Fumble 13, and he asks a very direct question. Is it Shieldhouse or bust, guys? What's your take on that, Pete?
Well, look, I've always felt that Jim Schwartz being an option was sort of the likeliest way to be doing this over again in 12 months. And that's largely because Jimmy Haslam decided to make it a point that Kevin Stefanski didn't win enough with this roster. That immediately puts pressure on a guy who comes in, especially if they were on the staff that was just here. So from that standpoint, I suppose, yeah, then it's Shieldhouse or bust at that point, because if they don't go with Shieldhouse, theoretically they are going to go with Schwartz.
Yeah, theoretically, that would be where they go. They still have Todd Monken and Anthony Lynn on their list of people that they've interviewed that have no one else interested in them at this point. I think it's Shieldhouse or bust. I really do. The Cleveland Browns are not selling success, Pete. They don't have a track record of success over the last 25 years. What they're selling is hope. And I think Shieldhouse is a little bit different from Schwartz and the others in that we don't know what his ceiling is, and he kind of brings hope to the equation that he might be another McVay or what have you. And I think they really, really need to land him. And speaking as a fan and as a web dork, both, I would be a little bit disappointed if they're not able to pull him in.
It would, there's a lot of what I would say is premature panic on the coaching search. Mm-hmm. But the second that they can't, or if like Shieldhouse were to say, I'm not interested, then I think all that becomes very warranted. You can at least make the case that the Browns have gone through this process, and reportedly they've been on Shieldhouse the entire way as an option. So if they land him, there are people who are still going to look at this as settling and everything else. But the Browns can sit here and go, this is why we do why we operate the way we do. And much has been made about this whole notion of, well, the Browns make guys write essays and, the homework and all this stuff. And this has been a very popular laugh line for people, but it's the same process they've employed going back to 2016. And the process they employed came up with Sean McDermott, who then Jimmy Haslam didn't hire. The same process came up with Kevin Stefanski the first time, who they didn't hire then. It came up with Kevin Stefanski the second time, who they did hire, and then promptly won Coach of the Year twice. So everybody can make fun of this thing and say, well, it's stupid, and the Browns are stupid for doing it, but it has landed on good coaching candidates the times they've done it. So if that process lands them Nate Shieldhouse and he proves to be successful, great. Because nobody's going to, you can say what you want, and there are people who are going to complain about Kevin Stefanski and all this other stuff. That has been far and away their most successful coach since returning to this team. So it has worked for them. We'll see where they end up with this, but like, I don't think it's a huge deal of what they're asking, especially the money they pay out for these jobs. So if you're that insulted, then you sort of confirm the point that you're probably not right for the job. That stuff just seems very immaterial to me ultimately, but like it's easy to get, it's easy to get likes and retweets and all this stuff on various social platforms when you make fun of that.
Yeah. There's a lot of that going on social media, keeping an eye on it during the course of the broadcast. just in case Schefter breaks something. So you don't have to go on to the sewer that is social media unless you want to, because we're keeping an eye on it for you, and I'm sure people on our chat will as well. Chris here with a point I agree with, and I think you were speaking to it, Pete. Said we really don't know how other teams do their research on coaching. Why do we assume that the Browns way is the wrong way? And I think you made an argument that it may, in fact, be effective, Pete, right?
At the very least, it's different. And different's not necessarily a bad thing, because how many, even with Jimmy Haslam, there were a number of coaching hires that were basically, a guy's nephew or a friend of a guy. And this is unfortunately the way it's been done for years and years and years in the league, where it's word of mouth. It's guys who have already coached who are telling you, oh, my kid's great. And there is this natural nepotism in coaching that continues to permeate. And, they've done the search firm thing. I'd rather they do their own search than export it. And so if they need to come up with a process that makes sense, I have no issue with that. Now, is it necessarily the best process? I have no idea. But there are how many, coaching hires are missed or done poorly because they rush it. They don't go about it the right way. And they just hire somebody because, somebody told them it would be good. Beyond Pat Shurmur here, which was a disaster. But who was the offensive coordinator that Peyton Manning swore up and down was going to be great, and then has completely disappeared from the league? And that was something the Browns were interested in at one point. The Browns, the most popular candidates that have ever been sort of linked to the Browns have been Hugh Jackson, Chip Kelly, and who am I missing? There's one more, Josh McDaniels, and they have all been objectively terrible. That's the other part. People are really bad at doing this, especially when it comes to fans and everything else. So I have no issue with trying to come up with something that gives you parameters and data that looks at this, and people can knock analytics, but I frankly like that better than I'm just going to go with my gut and you feel like the right guy for this job, or, we get along, so you should be in charge of my football team. The Browns, because when we went into this coaching search, all these people were talking about they wanted to get rid of Kevin Stefanski, which real fast people are changing their mind on that one. After having already jumped out of the plane and deciding, oh, maybe I don't want to do this. But additionally, they are looking at this and going, well, we're the Cleveland Browns. We should get a good head coach and we should take this super seriously. And then the Browns organization's like, yeah, we're going to take this super seriously. And then they do it in a way that's serious. And people are like, well, you shouldn't do it like that. This is the stuff where you lose me on this whole thing. So, and my last point on this whole nepotism thing is it ends up with doing what the NFL really does not want teams to do, which is that minority candidates basically never get jobs. And the Rooney Rule fiasco, which was the biggest nothing burger of all time relative to this coaching job. People lost their minds the last 2 weeks over the Rooney Rule, which the Browns were perfectly compliant with and had nothing to do with anything. Everybody except one team has hired a white head coach. So because they keep recycling these guys, and some of these are the next hot coordinator or whatever. But when you're always hiring the son of or the best buddy of and all these other things, they almost invariably are white. So if you're trying to have a serious search and trying to really find good candidates, in this case, they feel seriously enough about Nate Shieldhouse to be like, we really like him. Those guys go by the wayside in these type of searches. So if he proves to be a hidden gem, and if the Browns were able to land him, then it suggests that something they're doing is working, as opposed to let's compare that to what the Buffalo Bills seem to be doing right now, which is chasing after everybody else's guys and basically they're interviewing him. Oh, we want to interview him. So there's a whole lot to this that we don't really know truly how the Browns feel about their situation and if they're upset or whatever. But it won't be surprised if they land Shieldhouse that everybody's sort of relaxes and goes, okay, this was probably the guy they wanted all along, and we'll see what he does. And ultimately, the thing is, like, this process, whatever you want to say about it, we don't know, because he's not been a head coach. He's not been the head coach of the Cleveland Browns. He's not been a head coach of anything. He is an unknown. And that is part of why you're doing this. That's part of why, if you're the Browns and you fire a guy like Kevin Stefanski, then to me, which always made sense, you are essentially panning for gold. So you might as well lean into it, as opposed to, well, we're gonna just hire the retread who's been around a while, and by the way, the owner really likes him, so we're just gonna do that. Which just, I mean, it's not to say it can't work. I don't want to bury Jim Schwartz before he's dead, but like, it understandably doesn't get met with a whole lot of excitement.
Right. I can certainly understand that. And I am one of those people who admittedly would not be too excited. I would probably try to talk myself into it over time, as people are wont to do, but not sure that I would necessarily greet it enthusiastically on day one. But, with Shieldhouse, it's not just a matter of him walking away from the Browns. He is being lured by the Buffalo Bills, as you mentioned, Pete, sort of following the Browns around and interviewing whoever they think might be an intriguing candidate. Why would Shieldhouse possibly prefer the Cleveland job as opposed to working with Josh Allen? What would be a rationale for him to go to Cleveland if he was offered the Buffalo gig as well?
Well, there's a couple of things, and one of them we don't know, which is the Jimmy Haslam element in terms of expectations. The Bills job comes with major expectations. Clearly, you are going there to win a Super Bowl, and now they want to win now. Whatever Jimmy Haslam thinks, he better not be going, you better win a Super Bowl now, because that's just delusional. And at that point, he needs to be committed. But he may have unrealistic expectations to win. We shall see. The other part along those same lines is, yeah, you have some latitude with the Bills offense, but Josh Allen is Josh Allen. Ultimately, he's going to really dictate the offense. Now, that may be a good point for you if you want to take that job. But if you're sitting there going, I want to do my own thing, I have an offense in mind, I've been really wanting to sort of unleash, the Browns have a lot more room to operate because they have so little in place on that side of the ball. Maybe Shieldhouse feels better about coaching the offensive side of the ball, and he likes the comfort of potentially having a defense already in place. The Browns defense is better than the Buffalo Bills defense. The Buffalo Bills defense is in flux in certain respects, which comes to some questions. But the most important element of why would you turn down the Bills job is because the Bills just did a public execution of their last head coach and threw him under the bus for every single fault they've ever had over the last several years, despite the fact that people with eyes and a brain realized that Sean McDermott did a really good job with that team. And even if you think Sean McDermott didn't get them far enough, there were real problems with the roster. And to then come out and basically say not only was he not good enough, but the roster was good enough. And even if you didn't like the roster, he's the guy who did it. As illustrated, where they basically destroyed a 22-year-old kid in public, in Keon Coleman, basically saying, you don't like Keon Coleman? Well, he's the guy who did it. Everything about that was completely unprofessional and a joke. And the fact of the matter is that the guy who's largely in charge of it is going to be your boss. But I mean, and both people, Brandon Beane, who has made himself a complete fool in this whole situation, looks terrible. And this is like the stuff I didn't know is how often he's been calling PFF to throw fits about stuff they've published, threatening to pull their business and all this other stuff because some writer there said they didn't like, Josh Allen when he was bad, and thought that Duck Hodges was a better quarterback at some point than Josh Allen. These are the things your GM is worried about, suggests that you have greater problems than this. That's then the owner basically backing him up and saying, yeah, he's completely right all the time, and the head coach was the problem. You are walking into a situation where you're going to take all the blame. There's already a setup that says we're going to take the blame. And, Jimmy Haslam for all of his faults. And, I've criticized his press conference. Andrew Berry's not going to do that. And Jimmy Haslam, to this point, certainly has not done it in the way that Pegula did, anything close to that. So it's amazing to say this, but Jimmy Haslam looks like the far more professional and more grown-ass adult in this situation, which is an achievement for him. So there are elements to this where you can sit there and go, yeah, the Browns job makes more sense because I'm not going in there to be the guy who's going to be blamed for everything. And whoever takes that job in Buffalo is going to get tagged at that, even if the fan base is almost certainly going to rally around the head coach, assuming they like the hire, and defend that guy to the hilt against everybody else because they're as aware of this situation as anybody else.
Yeah, there's Carlisle Knight, among others, made the point in the chat that, well, logically you would want to go to Buffalo. They've got Josh Allen, right? They've got a franchise quarterback in place, and they are set to win now. But I think that, once again, matches up against the expectations that, a coach has to fulfill. They expect to go to the Super Bowl, in first year of a new coach's tenure. The other thing with Udinski, in particular, is he's known for turning around quarterbacks. That's how he reached his level of fame, right? He helped turn around Sam Darnold. He helped turn around Trevor Lawrence. What higher ceiling is there than the way Josh Allen is playing right now? I mean, is Shieldhouse or Udinski going to go in there and turn Josh Allen into Superman? There's not a lot of room for growth there. It doesn't seem to me like quarterback is the Bills' biggest problem.
Right. So, it's the same thing when we talked about, Jesse Minter, who people freaked out about when he pulled out of the Browns search. It always seemed like an awkward fit. Beyond the fact that the defense was basically built here, and that might be its own, question. If Jesse Minter comes here and does a great job of the defense, is anybody really going to notice? Because they were already really good. So there's nowhere to sort of go other than maintaining them being good, unless they can elevate them to historic level, which theoretically that could happen with Josh Allen. But the expectation is your offense is going to be good because it's been good. So there isn't a whole lot of room for growth. And again, it's Super Bowl or bust. Whereas the Browns, if you are an offensive coach, if you get them to league average, you're doing a great job because they haven't been league average. So you get the opportunity to just get them to 15th, 16th rated offense and you're a hero. Whether or not that's a real reason, to take the job or not take the job, it is nevertheless a factor. The bar is relatively low in that circumstance, and getting to average on that side of the ball, so long as the defense continues to play well, the Browns are potentially a borderline playoff team. That's how, close they theoretically could be if the offense improves enough. So there's just more upside in terms of that. So, does low expectations mean that's a good job to take? Not really, but it does sort of frame how you're viewed in said job.
Yeah, for certain. Another question from Furu. I can't pronounce that. I'm sorry. Do you think the Browns panic if Nate turns the job down? Seems to me like they've got a built-in fallback, as uninspiring as that might be to some of us, namely me. But no reason to panic at this point? Or would you see them going out and maybe inviting Chris Shula in or something along those lines if Shieldhouse, says no thanks?
It's possible, but I doubt it because that would sort of be admitting the fact that they didn't get the guys they wanted. I mean, it's not the end of the world. I mean, the comparison I would make would be Penn State. Penn State had a disastrous coaching search and ultimately seemingly ended up with what is a very good coach in Matt Campbell. That's certainly going to be a tough first year, I think, for Penn State, but you can complain about the process and everything else. And it was an ugly run of time for Penn State when guys were turning down the job and going other places or whatever, but they ultimately landed on the right guy. So if pride is an issue, they will just go to Jim Schwartz. If it's not, and they're just like, we desperately want to find the right guy, and we don't believe Jim Schwartz is that guy, so long as they land on the right guy, then they will be okay. It's results. Right. It's results driven at that point.
Yeah, one hopes. Ty Sox 15 here says, don't sleep on Monken or Lynn. I am sleeping on them, I guess, because I don't consider them serious candidates. Do you consider them serious candidates for anything other than OC, Pete?
I mean, Monken was among the finalists, so I mean, I guess he's got a shot. I don't think that's the route they should go or will go, so I guess I'm discounting him. Lynn, to me, is interesting because I frankly think they've only interviewed him once, as far as I know, but it was in person. So maybe that sort of speeds it up for them. But I do feel like Anthony Lynn was more along the lines of being certainly taken seriously as a head coaching candidate. But I think it's more likely that an Anthony Lynn would be coming with a Nate Shieldhouse potentially as an offensive coordinator role than necessarily a head coach. And he could be given the assistant head coach title if they want to go that route, whatever. Because if they go with the Shieldhouse, and this would have been true of Udinsky or any of the other young coaches, they probably really wanted to do what they did with Kevin Stefanski, pair him with a very experienced former head coach. Not only did Kevin Stefanski ultimately end up with Jim Schwartz, but when he originally came in, he had Bill Callahan, who was a former head coach, and that experience was valuable, in addition to the fact that Bill Callahan is a legendary offensive line coach. Anthony Lynn is a very credible coach. He's been a good coordinator. He's done the job, and obviously there are people who think highly of him in terms of being a leader. So having somebody, Jim Schwartz would certainly be useful if he's sticking around on the defensive side of the ball, but Anthony Lynn is also theoretically insurance then if Jim Schwartz decides to take his ball and go home, giving them a veteran influence on the offensive side of the ball and just being there to be like, to make sure the guy's in the right place, dotting I's, crossing T's, making sure he's doing all those things necessary, because there is going to be a little bit of a learning curve. He may be great ultimately, and he may be able to hit the ground running, but just having that insurance there to sort of make sure everything's right certainly would be valuable for the Browns.
Well, sort of what the Rams did with McVay, right? They had him aligned with Wade Phillips his first year. Some other questions. Shula, I used earlier, was a bad example. He already turned the Browns down, if I'm not mistaken. Carlisle Knight pointed that out in the chat. But what about Clint Kubiak? Why are we not talking to Kubiak of Seattle? And Nate wants to know, did anyone watch the game yesterday?
Nope, nobody did at all. Look, the Browns have not talked to a single guy that they interviewed in a previous cycle outside of the two guys that were already in the building. So they interviewed Tommy Rees, who ultimately is going to Atlanta with Kevin Stefanski to be the offensive coordinator there. And they talked to Jim Schwartz, who's in the mix for the job. They have not repeated a interview with anybody else. Now, that's not to say they can't, but they seemingly have the information they want from those people. So if they want to revisit it, it would be with the intent seemingly to go hire them. So that's not out of the realm of possibility. But if you are somebody who likes Clint Kubiak, he's very good on offense. But I would Google him and look up a video of him because he's Kevin Stefanski almost to a T. He's the same guy. He talks the same way, is very similar personality. So, like a lot of this whole process is suggesting, if that's who you want, why did you fire the other guy? Because they're so eerily similar to just replace them and not go in a different direction. Now, the search itself may be yielding reasons why you shouldn't have fired Kevin Stefanski, and we warned you not to, but they made that choice. So I don't think they're going to try to get what is essentially a clone of him right out of the gate. The other part about this is I don't know how genuinely interested Kubiak is in getting a head coaching job right now. He may be content to staying with the Seattle Seahawks. He's obviously been linked to the Las Vegas Raiders. We'll see how true that is. And certainly if that's the case, then he's going to walk into a situation where he's going to have a quarterback in Fernando Mendoza and some other weapons. And but there's a lot of work to do. So we'll see, if winning the Super Bowl is enough for him, or if he wants to stay there and try to do it again, and see if staying around at a place like Seattle for another year gives him a situation where he can then have his basically pick of jobs, as opposed to taking over a team that would be picking first in the draft, or in the situation the Browns are, because his star may be at a level where he doesn't want to sort of do that. It's the same thing for, the people who are saying there, why aren't the Browns talking to Sean McDermott? I don't doubt that the Browns would like to talk to Sean McDermott, but I don't think Sean McDermott is necessarily in a position where he wants to go to Cleveland, because he's become very accustomed to winning. He's been very good. He's winning 10 games a year. He may not be in a hurry to walk into a team where he may win half that many games. He may want to sit out a year and then have his pick of great jobs because he was so successful. So this is the problem, is like, people want to make this argument, well, there's only 32 jobs. And yet, as we watch, there are any number of coaches who sit there and go, yeah, I'll wait, because they can and they do.
One guy who has been on the bench for a little while came off of the bench this last week. And by and large, I think that the opinion of the OBR Slack was approving when Mike McCarthy was offered the job by the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was in a similar situation to McDermott, in that he took some time off and came back for the right opportunity. But if I recall correctly, Pete, you were a little bit skeptical about the McCarthy hire in Pittsburgh. Would you like to explain why?
Mike McCarthy has walked into two unbelievable situations. He walked into Aaron Rodgers with a great defense and everything going for Aaron Rodgers at the peak of his powers. He won one Super Bowl, which is great, but ask any Packers fan, they're sitting there going, we should have won more. Then he leaves and goes to Dallas, where they have Dak Prescott, who's already a great quarterback. They win 12 games a year and do absolutely nothing in the playoffs. In fact, they don't just lose in the playoffs. They get destroyed in the playoffs when he's there. Now he's on job 3. There is no great quarterback at Pittsburgh. They have to now find one and make one. So now he has to basically prove that he can be a builder. And I have huge skepticism that he's able to do it. He lied to the Dallas Cowboys and other teams about what he was doing in his time off, by saying he went to PFF and learned all about analytics, only to then admit after getting the Cowboys job that in fact he made that up just to get the job, which is not great. Now, having said all that, could it work with Pittsburgh? Sure, it'd be great. And maybe he can get something out of the quarterback position. Maybe they can draft Ty Simpson, and he can have similar success as he's had with the other quarterbacks. I'm hoping by year 19 that he can figure the whole thing out. At that point, he will be 81 years old. But listen, they give the Steelers give you a long runway, so I'm excited to see what he does with it. Well into his elder years, I hope they stick together for a long time.
Speaking personally, I approve of people hiring people in their 60s. I think it's a very good idea. These people are experienced and so on and so forth. Mike McCarthy may not be the may not be the optimal hire, but there we go. Let's get to some more of the questions. This one comes from Kelly Black, and the question is Tom Telesco in the DePodesta role now? If so, will it continue?
No.
And no, he is not.
They're not going. They don't have a chief strategy officer. They've used consultants a ton. They've had different people in to operate as consultants. Ryan Grigson was a consultant for a while after he was let go by the Colts. They obviously had Mike Vrabel in for this past year before he went to the New England Patriots. They've done this over and over and over again, which is good. I like the practice. But it does not mean that they're going to do anything along these lines. And more than likely, as happened with Grigson, and there's one other GM's name I'm forgetting, both of them were ultimately hired out by other teams to take on different jobs. So it can be a useful useful endeavor to get another opinion, to get another viewpoint. In Telesco's case, somebody who's done these things before. You don't have to take their advice necessarily, but it's useful to have it to just get somebody else in the room. But no, there's no plan at this point, and I don't think there frankly will be for them to ever bring back a chief strategy officer. And that's partly because the chief strategy officer job isn't just a guy who sits there and tells your team what to do. There's Deep District's job was far more involved in terms of processes and efficiencies and getting departments to talk to each other effectively and basically being able to try to improve the overall efficiency of the team. So let's use a rough example. Having the analytics department and being able to try to translate that in a way that the information is usable by other people, whether it be the scouting department, whether it be the football people, and giving them, not just giving them a notebook and saying, here's all the analytics, trying to give that in a way that is not only, that doesn't make it so overwhelming, and so they can actually use it to their benefit. Same thing with like trying to maximize getting the scouting department and the coaches to be on the same page in terms of what they're looking for with players. So I don't think they're going to do anything like that again. Paul DePodesta had his use. I think they're done with what he's done for the most part. And, I don't see any Telesco or any of these other people in that type of role.
Yeah, they have built, I assume, a pretty sturdy analytics team under DePodesta, and there's probably someone internally who can help fill the analytics side of that.
Ken Kovac
role. Ken
Kovac has been running that thing for years. My understanding for the longest time is the analytics department and Paul DePodesta's department were entirely separate.
Oh, really?
But that ultimately, yes, DePodesta helped set it up, but the Ken Kovac, and I could be wrong on this, but I don't think I am. The Ken Kovac has been essentially running the analytics element for years, and Paul DePodesta was his own separate entity.
All right, interesting. All right, well, let's go to this question from James Frank. Joe Thomas, a popular choice to be an offensive line coach. He certainly, had the successful career. I guess my first reaction to this is that the only place I know he's coached is Germany. And that very often great players don't necessarily make great coaches. It's not always true. It's not always not true. But I think Joe Thomas had such ability, he didn't have to, maximize it like some players have to. But that would be my take on it. But I know he's a popular guy and everybody loves him around here. But do you think that it would make sense for the Browns to pull him into the coaching arena if he's willing to give up his beef ambitions?
No, not because he can't do it. I think he'd be a great offensive line coach. But part of the reason he went to Germany is because he didn't have to dedicate 9 months of the year to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't have to do, he probably put in a good amount of hours, but I don't think it was 70 to 80 hours a week. He has 4 kids that are like little. And he has a million businesses he's running, whether it's this Hall of Fame beef or, the Mission Barbecue stuff. I don't know how much he owns of any of these things other than the Hall of Fame beef, because that's the one he's pimping lately. And by all means, he can do that here. We'll take the money. But I don't think Joe Thomas has any interest of dedicating himself where he's going to say, I have to do this for this many hours and I can't do all this other stuff. Joe Thomas will show up. He'll occasionally come by and try to help out with stuff, which is great. But not being an official capacity allows him to live his life the way he wants. And I don't think you're going to get him to do anything else because that is just a significant time investment. And if he was willing to do it, it would cost a ton to make it worth his while. But he's just got too much stuff going on, and I don't think he has any interest. He loves his life. So it would be a major sacrifice for him to give up all these things just to be the offensive line coach. And that's not to say anything against coaching, but like it is a life. You have to dedicate a lot of time to it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Again, very popular guy. We love Joe Thomas. He really should write me at barry@theobr.com and take out a sponsorship for the site. I'm sure he would sell tons of beef to our audience. But until I hear from him, we'll assume he's not going to become a coach. and move forward. Search MTC writes, does having a Pro Bowl quarterback help in the recruitment of a coach? Fumble 13 adds to that. When I was young, I watched the Pro Bowl and loved the competitive nature of the game. Now with the Sanders news, I have to laugh. Do you guys feel the same? So this seems to be more of an audience magnet to me than necessarily even a repetition of the Ty Huntley Pro Bowl appointment. But what do you have any thoughts about all that craziness, Pete?
Well, I'm not going to bash Shedeur Sanders because he didn't do anything. And I don't doubt that there are a whole lot of people who voted for him because there are people who are going to vote for him to do basically anything. But it's a product of what the game has become, which is most people don't want to go because part of this is because when Fumble 13 was young, there were probably only 14 games in the season and potentially even less than that, depending on how old some of these people are. The Pro Bowl meant more. There was more money involved for it. There was a competitive element, but like there's too much money in these players now where teams don't want to risk them. The players know that they don't want to risk it. And this isn't the situation where like the Browns played an all-star team after they won the championship. Like it's completely different to what it's been. But it is like Tyler Huntley in a lot of ways because they just ran out of bodies, people who wanted to participate in everything else. So it's a laugh line for people. And obviously, if you're asking me on the merits, does Shedeur Sanders deserve to be in the Pro Bowl? Of course not. But this is what they've made it. I wish they'd named the team and stopped playing it because they don't do this with linemen. Linemen just get the initial guys and they move on. They don't do anything. But with these throwing events and stuff, they have to have somebody on there. So they'll go through all the quarterbacks until they find somebody. So it's, Vince Young's Pro Bowl, Derek Anderson's Pro Bowl. This was unserious years and years ago. This is certainly not a new element. The only reason Baker Mayfield didn't make the Pro Bowl in 2020 is because it was the COVID year and they didn't have it. Otherwise, they would have done the same thing. So I don't watch the Pro Bowl. I make it a point not to watch the Pro Bowl stuff because I think it's stupid. I'd rather, pick the teams and let them go play a golf tournament or something because I just don't care. But the NFL is determined because the fact of the matter is people watch and they're going to put something on TV because it's going to draw a number and like 10 million people are going to watch it. So they're going to make sure there's something there every time.
Yeah, there's money involved. Like you, I have not paid attention to the Pro Bowl at all in at least 20 years. I'm not sure who watches it, but someone apparently out there does because they continue to do it. All right, let's get back to some additional questions that we have here. If Shieldhouse becomes the coach, what does that mean for the Cleveland Browns? Braden asked, do you guys think Shieldhouse would call plays if hired as head coach? Did he call plays at ISU while he was the offensive coordinator?
He did call plays for Iowa State when he was the offensive coordinator and did a pretty good job with it. They improved quite a bit initially. The answer is I don't know if he would want to call plays. I mean, that is a very easy thing for these young coaches to do because they feel like this is a place where they can make an immediate impact. They have control and they can sort of make their mark immediately. Given the size of the job, it may be smarter for if Anthony Lynn was willing to come in and be the play caller and Shieldhouse just be the head coach. But part of what drives some of these things and the viability of some of these coaches, like Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, is because they're their team's play caller. And the fact of the matter is, by virtue of being their play caller, they have more value to their team. That gives those teams a huge advantage. And in some ways, the biggest advantage every single year, even though obviously between them they have one Super Bowl. But nevertheless, there is a feeling that if you have a great coach who's also a play caller, you have a leg up on everybody else. Andy Reid's got 3 Super Bowls. Even as we're going to have Mike Vrabel and Mike McDonald in the Super Bowl, who are nominally defensive guys, there's still a sense that like you get worried if you have a defensive head coach and your offensive coordinator leaves. So if Josh McDaniels was to somehow get a 15th head coaching job, the Patriots might be in trouble. We're dealing with this now watching the Detroit Lions. In fact, Anthony Lynn was his first offensive play caller. He fired him after a year. Ben Johnson was there for 3 years. They were great. Ben Johnson leaves. Johnny Morton was the offensive coordinator. He's fired after 1 year. And now they have Drew Petzing is the new offensive coordinator this coming year. So if you're a Lions fan, you're sitting there going, well, if this doesn't work, now we're on our 4th different coordinator. At that point, now we're probably looking at replacing the head coach. Whereas Kyle Shanahan doesn't deal with these questions, even if there's occasionally rumblings about people suggesting he should be fired because he hasn't won at this point. But nobody's saying Sean McVay should be fired. Nobody's going to question that because of the value people can palpably see on the field. So it's very easy for a young head coach like Nate Scheelhaase or any of these guys to be like, I should call plays because that's going to be the best thing that helps me.
Right. If you've got questions, fire them off now. We got 15 more minutes left in the show. And we can certainly handle anything you can throw at us. At this point, Kelly Black wants to know if it's Scheelhaase, do you think he can pry anyone else from the Rams? I'm assuming she means coaching staff.
It's possible. I think the Rams are going to fight tooth and nail against that because they are simultaneously worried that Arizona Cardinals are going to hire offensive coordinator Mike LaFleur to be their head coach. So if Scheelhaase was to take the Browns job and LaFleur was to take the Arizona Cardinals job, they are suddenly hemorrhaging staff, and the Rams are keenly aware of this, and they're going to try to avoid that. They can't do much about it with certain guys if they were to promote them to a certain level. But if they don't, then yes, there's a way that could happen. But I suspect there will be guys Scheelhaase would like to take with him. I just think the Rams are going to make it really, really tough on them just to try to avoid further bleeding because they would potentially have 2 coaches leaving their staff who could try plucking guys away, or the other alternative would be taking guys that they might want to get back into the mix. So, Raheem Morris, for example, was with the Rams most recently before he got the Falcons job. They might think, oh, they've got a great shot of being able to bring him back. Well, if one of these guys was to take them as defensive coordinator with them, that would eliminate that. So I think the Rams are going to fight hard to avoid having further brain drain from their coaching staff if they can't keep those 2, one or both of those guys in-house.
Yeah, makes total sense. Advanced AutoWorks Motorsports, I'm sorry, says if we adopt a more Rams-like offense, does that give us a better idea of what types of wide receiver or offensive line we may target? Could Fannin end up being more of a wide receiver than a tight end?
So as far as the offensive line element or the general offensive element, unclear. If Scheelhaase may love what the Rams are doing, he also may have his own ideas because obviously he was at a different program first in Iowa State, and I doubt he was doing that there. Now he may have had input and helped shape where they are, and maybe that's where he wants to go. But it's not clear. Like the Rams in terms of their run game was pretty balanced, almost close to 50-50 in terms of gap and zone. So that doesn't really give you a big hint, and neither does the wide receiver element. However, the Fannin part's interesting because this is more of a generalized where the NFL is going right now. Because the answer with Fannin is being more wide receiver than the tight end. The answer is he and players like him. Fannin essentially plays the same position as Puka Nacua now. It's an amorphous position that can do whatever you need it to do at a given time. Now, Fannin's never going to be a guy who's consistently going to put his hand on the ground. That's just not how he's built. But if you want to line him up in the slot, you want to make him the point of a bunch guy, occasionally line him up outside, put him in the backfield, all these other elements, you can do that. And you can do a lot of the things you see Puka Nacua doing with the Rams in terms of how they align with him, how he is as a blocker, and all those elements that Fannin could theoretically do that are very similar. So it's a growing tent in terms of that sort of slot position, because you've got super small guys or smaller guys anyway. And then you have these, space tight ends, the so-called F, that can, not quite big enough to be hand on the ground type guys, although some are, and can just create problems in space. So Fannin is in this category. The Browns could certainly add more of those guys and balance it out. Certainly my advice on that would be draft Mekhi Lemon. He fits right into this bucket, and you could have both those guys operating in the middle of the field. But yeah, that's sort of the larger conversation with guys like Fannin, Puka Nacua. JSN can do a little bit of that, but he can even do more because you can line him up outside without issue, as you can with Nacua, but he's still a little bit more wide receiver than the other things, but he can still do those other elements.
Right. And Carlisle Knight kind of anticipated your point there about Mekhi Lemon being an interesting fit into a Shieldhouse scheme, potentially. But there is no question about your advocacy of Mekhi Lemon at this point, Pete.
He's the best receiver in the class, period. I mean, that's it. So if you're picking 6 in the draft, you want to take a receiver, take the best one. That's him. So it's not to say that it's a guarantee, but I'm just based on the information we have and data and projecting that forward. It's Mekhi Lemon at a strong number 1, even though he's not the classic X. He doesn't have the height and the speed that you necessarily want, but he just does everything else at a really, really high level. And if you watched the NFC Championship and you watched how important JSN and Puka Nacua were to those respective offenses, nobody does those type of things better coming out of this collegiate class than Mekhi Lemon does.
Carlisle also asked, isn't there a backup quarterback from Iowa State in the NFL right now? And I believe that there is, and he plays for the aforementioned Kyle Shanahan, right?
He started for Shieldhouse when he was the offensive coordinator there, when they had a really big year. After Shieldhouse left, I believe, is when he sort of regressed a little bit and had a down year and ultimately ended up being the last pick of the draft. I think Shieldhouse was already gone for his final year, but his best year, Shieldhouse was his offensive coordinator.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're referring to of course, Brock Purdy as the quarterback at Iowa State. Let's see here. Just a couple questions left. This one from James Frank asks, is there any shot at bringing back Nick Chubb as a third down back for short yardage situations? Everybody loves Nick Chubb. He's one of the reasons I was rooting for the Texans in an ill-fated weekend where all of my favorite teams lost. Cleveland Browns with Rocket and, their 2 rookie running backs doesn't seem like a welcoming place for a veteran at this point, Pete.
Not only that, but do you really want to see Nick Chubb sort of slowly die in Cleveland? Say what you will. He was not very good with the Houston Texans. He did well in the playoffs, and I was more than happy to see him knock the Steelers out of the playoffs again. Mm-hmm. His record is better than Tomlin's in the playoffs as of late. But part of that was you got to watch Nick Chubb play for a playoff team. And if the Browns aren't going to be that, do you really want to see Nick Chubb just sort of disappear? The Browns are a younger team. They are going in a different direction. And you can talk about the benefits of Nick Chubb being a veteran leader and all these other things. But if your goal is to watch him play football, he's in the right place or somewhere similar to that where he gets to do it. So he got to play in the playoffs. He got to enjoy that success. I see no reason for either side to want him to come back to Cleveland. He was great, but you're not going to be happy watching him not be good for the Browns. The only guy you want to see play for the Browns was the guy who was Hall of Fame caliber talent. And I don't think people can be okay with that. And if he's sitting on the bench not doing anything, you're not going to be happy about it. Or God forbid they cut him. Come on.
Yeah, that would not go over well. I've been keeping an eye on social media to see if Adam Schefter had anything to say or any of those guys about what's going on with the Browns. So far, there's nothing. Shieldhouse is doing a virtual interview with the Bills this evening. Apparently that is underway. But we have not heard any other new news. Serge MDC wants to know, how is Bubba Ventrone still employed? I'm worried about this almost as much as the head coach.
Why? Why? He doesn't do anything. He's just sitting there. Like, and this is the funny part, is like people are chiding Kevin Stefanski, he's going to take Bubba Ventrone to Atlanta with him. Well, he didn't. They hired a special teams coach who's not named Bubba Ventrone. Like, there are guys who are theoretically under contract that if another team called and said, hey, we want to hire this guy, they're going to let him out of the contract. Like, who cares? Because we just saw them do this with Chad O'Shea. All these people are thrilled to see Chad O'Shea leave. I still don't understand why. And he goes to the Chiefs. So this is another situation where, like, oh man, I can't stand this guy. And a better franchise right now said we want him. So, like, Bubba Ventrone, the situation will take care of itself. But, like, don't be surprised if another team that's better than the Browns ends up hiring him as well. But he will be gone eventually. It's not, like, a thing to worry about.
If I was the GM or owner, I would not take it upon myself to dump the existing coaching staff. I'd let the new head coach make up his mind what he wants to do. And if he wants to fire Bubba Ventrone, then Bubba Ventrone will be fired. And I would suggest that's probably a likely outcome. Last question I have in the stack comes from Kelly. And the question is simply, who do you guys prefer?
I mean, if it's a choice between Shieldhouse and Jim Schwartz, I take Shieldhouse. And that's not because I have some grand confidence he's going to be the right guy. I genuinely don't know. But it is entirely a matter of, I don't think Jim Schwartz makes this team better than what they had in Kevin Stefanski. I think it is a downgrade. Could I be proven wrong? Absolutely. But I think the Browns would be worse with just Jim Schwartz as head coach and bringing somebody else in than they were last year, which is my whole fear all along. The Browns are going to fire Kevin Stefanski and end up worse for it and be just like the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah. Well, Jim Schwartz is doing what Jim Schwartz should be doing, which is being a great defensive coordinator. He seems like he's in the ideal position right now, but everybody's ambitious. Everybody wants a shot at the head gig, I guess. And so he wants the opportunity, and it's going to make for an interesting situation with the Cleveland Browns as they wind up this head coaching search. Question from Fumble 13: would you trade Dylan Gabriel if Atlanta called?
Maybe. Like, what are they offering? Like, I'm not in a hurry to throw away Dylan Gabriel. Because the Browns have so many quarterbacks that they can afford to just now give guys away. Look, the Browns should, unless Atlanta calls up with a compelling offer, I don't think it's coming right now. They should see what Dylan Gabriel can do in OTAs and training camp and all this other stuff, because he may get better and you may be surprised. I'm not going to project him to be a starting caliber quarterback, but he may genuinely get better and be at least worth more in a potential trade. But, like, we're now, I'm not interested in doing the Falcons a favor because people don't like Dylan Gabriel. We're at some point they're going to get to a point, because presumably they're going to sign a veteran or trade for a veteran or otherwise acquire a veteran and have a full quarterback room. At that point, they will have to evaluate the situation. But if, say, the Browns bring in a quarterback X who's a veteran, and then Shedeur Sanders were to get hurt, you kind of need Dylan Gabriel at that point. So don't be in a hurry to get rid of these guys. And the flip side of that is, if we get into August, as happened last year, and a team has a quarterback go down, as was the case with Aiden O'Connell with the Raiders, the Browns then traded Kenny Pickett and got the 5th round pick back that they used to acquire him. So there's no reason for them to sort of rush into anything. But if there's a good offer, yeah, they should take it.
If you do trade Gabriel, would you be interested at all in picking up a developmental quarterback to join the team? Drew Aller will probably drop in the draft, but he's kind of interesting in a way. But would you go ahead and follow that route?
I have no interest in any quarterback in this draft class. None. And part of this is because the Browns have, even if they don't want to admit it, like I think they're looking ahead to 2027. So one of the complaints that people made this past year when the Browns got Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders was, what's the point? You're just going to draft a quarterback in 26. Well, those guys are still here for another year now under this circumstance. So you get to see if they can develop into something. But if you're, you can certainly make the case. You can certainly make the case that you should take a quarterback every year. I just think this class is miserable for the most part. And again, if you're then going to try to load up on the 27 class and get a quarterback from there, where there's a ton of guys that are going to be in it, then you're immediately going to say, well, then picking this guy was useless. So there's a world where you could do it. Maybe that quarterback's a huge surprise. I just don't see that guy. And specifically as it relates to Drew Aller, I think Cleveland is the last place he should go, because I just watched a fan base absolutely lose their minds over a 5th-round pick getting reps and not getting first-team reps all spring. And Drew Aller needs to go somewhere and disappear. He needs to just be a developmental quarterback and not be talked about in the field. And that will not happen in Cleveland, because this fan base cannot deal with it. Because if somebody struggles, they're immediately going to talk themselves into, well, who cares that this guy is not ready? He'll figure it out in the field. And then they don't, and they struggle. And then you move on to the next one, which is what we've just watched happen with both Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. Now we're already trying to move on. So like, you're not giving yourself any kind of process to develop these guys. Like Drew Aller in Green Bay would be great, but that's the perfect franchise to do that type of thing. They can do that. Buffalo would be great for a guy like Drew Aller, because he can just go there and work on his craft and try to get better and maybe eventually become something. That's not going to happen in Cleveland, unfortunately. We refuse to allow it.
Last question of the evening from Freddie. He says, if Shieldhouse says no, how are we feeling? We kind of addressed to that earlier in the show, but just to sort of reiterate my position, would be disappointment, because I'm looking for a coach that has a relatively high ceiling, having given up Stefanski. I don't know what Shieldhouse's ceiling is, but I suspect I do for the other candidates that the Browns are looking at. And so I would be a little bit disappointed in that. Pete, you seemed less concerned or less emotionally involved with that.
Well, I mean, the bottom line is, if they don't get Shieldhouse, and even if they do get Shieldhouse, I will still sit here and say the same thing. They shouldn't have gotten rid of the head coach they had, but this will just sort of underline the fact that I was right, which ultimately is more important than anything else in this conversation. So we'll see. Like, look, they're going to get a head coach eventually, and even if they, again, I'll relate to Penn State. They could completely screw this up the entire way and end up getting a good coach. Simultaneously, they could nail it relative to their process and get the wrong head coach. So I have very little expectation and very little to attach to, because I just don't have enough information. Like, all these people got super attached to Grant Udinski, and I'm sitting here going, based on what? There's nothing concrete I can really grab onto or build a foundation on. He might be great. But I have no idea. And you can sit here and go, well, he did A, B, and C, maybe. But this is the problem. I don't like head coaching searches because there's so little information. So largely I can only operate on what I don't want.
Fair enough. Well, I tell you what, thanks for all the questions tonight, folks. I didn't have to rely on any of the nonsense that I wrote before the show began. So we just went through your questions. They were great. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate all the people who dialed in tonight to watch Gang of Three, which there's only 2 of us, but we're still a gang. Pete, thanks for hanging out with me. And you will be back on the air tomorrow night at 8 o'clock to hang out with Joe Mazzullo and talk more football. So you guys want to tune into that. And just as one last offer, we are now selling 2 months of the OBR for a mere $1. So you can get 2 months of the OBR during this crucial time for a mere $1. You can go to the OBR and click the join link, or you could click that QR code with the duck in the center which is at the top left of your screen. And that will take you to our subscription page where you can get this deal. And lots of people are taking it. And if you're not a subscriber already, please come join us and hang out with us on the premium forums. That is it for Gang of Three for tonight. Thanks for hanging with us. I'll be back next Monday with Pete and Lane for another edition of Gang of Three. Good night, everybody.